Hi everyone, so today I'll be reviewing Being Mortal by Atul Gawande. So this is a non-fiction book which mainly talks about the ideas of medicine, hospice, and of life care, how medicine is supposed to be focusing on the well-being of the receiver of treatment rather than the survival. Basically, medicine should be focusing on the quality rather than the quantity of life. So Being Mortal is basically a reflection of Gawande's regarding how people could live better even though they are aging. So the author asks for a shift in a way that medical professionals are treating their patients, especially nearing the end of their life. Gawande proposes the idea that instead of prolonging life, medical professionals should focus on enhancing the quality of the patient's life. The author also gave his account as a medical professional as well as a family member on how to deal with patients or with family member who are facing age-related illness and how it basically changes the freedom of the patient or the family members and how it also entails loneliness. So this book is loosely divided into two parts. The first part mainly talks about how medical professionals should treat the patients who are experiencing old age or having an old age related illness. So in this part, Gawande raises a question whether medical professional should prioritize the safety of the person that is being cared for, or safety could be too much to the point that it inhibits the freedom of the person who are receiving care. Gawande concluded there is just too much focus on safety when it comes to people who are in need of assistance when they are in their old age. And so because there's too much focus on one thing, which is safety, the other thing, like quality of life, what makes life worth living for people who are in the old age, are kind of forgotten by the medical professionals. He also touched a point that nursing homes are acted as an institution rather than a home for the residents. So the author gives examples of how residents feel unhappy being placed in the nursing home, aka institution, how their life is being dictated and how they feel they are just surviving rather than to actually live. And this mainly happens because their bedtime is scheduled, their meal time is scheduled, and their meal is also controlled. How they basically doesn't really allow to have the sentimental hobbies. Basically their individuality is being taken away by the institution, by the nursing home. And this happens in the name of safety and regulation. This passage eventually gives us a really important conclusion, which is just because people of old age are in need of assistance doesn't mean that they have to give up their autonomy, at the very least, not fully. I read several reviews from Goodreads that people are quite underwhelmed by the first section, and I will personally disagree with that because it does provide a very important point regarding old age. I am still quite young right now, but just reading from this section really provides me with that urge to think about what I will do, how will I spend my old age. And this section also provides me with a really great lesson how when we think about old age, what we think is about the decline of our physical capability or fitness, but more often we don't really think about the decline of our mental capacity. So I always heard that it gets more difficult to study, to learn something new as you get older, but this book really puts me in a perspective how difficult it is to do something even mentally when you are, for example, in the 80s. There's an example of a man who's in his 80s, if I'm not mistaken. When he was young, he said that it will take him just 30 minutes to read, for example, an entire passage, but when he's in his 80s, it will take a double or even a triple amount of that. So the first section itself really brings me into the poignant aspect of old age. It's very easy now to sympathize to people who are in the old age, who really wants to maintain the very basic thing that they had when they're still young, which is their autonomy. So they didn't really ask much, but at the same time, they need to deal with the fact that the things that they enjoyed back then might not be enjoyable for now or slowly fading. So the second part of the book mainly talks about impending death, particularly a situation where science or technology could not stop the death. So there are several integral parts concerning the section, mainly the discussion that the medical professional must have regarding the impending death of the patient and how that discussion should be carried out, and how having such discussion with the patient is integral in maintaining the well-being of the patient, as it reveals what kind of health procedure that the patient is willing or not willing to carry. And so it's basically a way to maintain that the patient still has autonomy of themselves even though they are nearing their death. And Gawande also gives us the kind of medical professionals. Is it the one who basically like an authoritarian who basically tells what the patient should and should not do, or the technical ones who just renders an information, or how medical professionals could be a little bit of both. As a further idea of a patient maintaining their autonomy nearing their death, this chapter also touched upon ideas such as death with dignity and assisted death. So this section is highly informative, especially when it comes to what the medical professional should do, should react, should assist to a patient who is nearing their death. And it gives information concerning what the medical professional should take into account when it comes to the patient who are nearing their death. How this book really pays importance to what the patient wants that the medical professional should take into account. The second section is certainly an emotional read, how it basically provides an account of Gawande having to serve his father as his father is nearing his end of life. This book is certainly really nudges the reader to think about really big ideas like morality, how we want to spend our old age, and end-of-life healthcare. I have mainly positive points regarding this book, but I do find a little bit of problems in some areas. For example, some big topics, like for example, assisted death, is not really written in a way that is very fleshed out. It's kind of like included because his editor told him that it needs to be here, it needs to be included. And I think some of his ideas, like a very progressive ideas, could be argued better at least. I don't have to agree with his point, but what makes me a bit irked about his idea is that how he renders about his point is just a little bit too simplistic. For example, he stated that if science and technology can't do anything anymore to save someone from death, then that person should just do nothing. And just before that, he already noted that science and technology is basically an induction. Induction, you don't have all the datas. And so basically, he said that science and technology is not 100%. So if you argue that you have to do nothing by the standard of something that is not 100%, in that way, I do think it makes his argument less strong. I also wish that the author would touch more upon when it comes to the ethic of not doing anything. As I've laid out the strong point in my main critique regarding this book, I would like to touch upon the recommendation. So I would recommend this book to those who are looking for a book that mainly talks about, of course, the end of life care, and who is looking for a book that has a lot of examples concerning how the residents are feeling about their end-of-life care, perhaps for health professionals as well, especially those who are working in this particular area. I don't really recommend this book if you are looking for a book that raises the topic of assisted death. There is discussion about that, but I don't think it is the most thorough or fleshed out. Alright, so that was today's review of Being Mortal by Atul Gawande. I hope that this review will help you in determining whether this book is worth your time. Let me know in the comment section below if you're planning to read this book, or if you read this book, please share your thought. Before I sign off, I would like to thank everyone who made it to the end. Thank you guys so much for watching, and may your tea will always stay warm for reading.